Born on November 1, 2005 in Scotland, Amber Gibson was the second child of Anne Marie Adams and Peter Gibson. She joined the family 2 years after the birth of their first child, Connor Gibson. Amber, a beautiful red-haired baby, contrasted sharply with her brother, who had fair skin and dark hair. Their striking looks and cheerful personalities made them stand out. However, their home was marred by domestic violence. From a tender age, Amber and Connor witnessed their father's abusive behavior towards their mother. Peter's violence knew no bounds, causing physical, emotional, and mental harm to Anne Marie. He also had a criminal history, which included assaults on 2 minors and the abuse of an unknown woman. Due to these dire circumstances, both Amber and Connor were removed from their parental home and placed in the care of social services. After a thorough evaluation, they were relocated to live with the Niven family. Craig and Carol Niven, along with their 2 daughters, provided a nurturing and harmonious environment. This new home offered Amber and Connor a chance for a loving and dignified life, far removed from their troubled beginnings. At the ages of 3 and 5, respectively, Amber and Connor found solace and security with the Nivens. Connor even reassured Amber, saying they were finally safe. Meanwhile, their biological father, Peter, was convicted and sentenced to prison for his crimes. Craig and Carol Niven committed themselves to being exemplary parents. Their dedication led to the permanent custody of both children. Despite this positive change, Connor's past trauma began to manifest as he entered adolescence. Hoping it was just a phase, Craig and Carol took steps to address his needs, including enrolling him in a secondary school for children with social, emotional, and behavioral difficulties. Amber, in contrast, was flourishing. She displayed remarkable human qualities despite her early hardships. Generous, caring, and kind-hearted, Amber had an incredible perspective on life. She loved art and singing and attended Morehouse Academy, Bathgate. Her teachers and classmates admired her brilliance and vivacity, noting her big dreams and aspirations for the future. Amber's adoptive parents couldn't have been more pleased, and her foster sisters, Zero, were equally happy to have her around. However, Connor's behavior became increasingly concerning. Former classmates described him as unpleasant and noted that he spoke about harming others. There were even rumors that he had threatened a baby during that period. At home, things were no better. Craig eventually decided that leaving Connor alone with his younger sister was not advisable. He mentioned that they were not a good combination together, but never elaborated further. Despite the conflicts, Amber remained loyal to her brother, always trying to keep the peace. Then, an unexplained event occurred. Although Amber seemed like an ideal foster child, at 14, the care arrangement was terminated, and she moved to the Hill House Children's Unit in Hamilton. Paradoxically, her problematic brother stayed with the Nivens for another 2 years until he turned 18. Shortly after, Connor moved to the Blue Triangle homeless shelter. Despite the distance, Amber ensured that Connor remained a constant presence in her life. When Amber was 16, she crossed paths with Jamie Stars, a 20-year-old leading a chaotic lifestyle, living just 3 miles from her new residence. Jamie had been removed from his parents' care at 3 years old and had led a troubled life, including substance abuse and criminal behavior. In May 2021, Jamie assaulted a young woman in the area. Taking advantage of her intoxicated state, he proceeded without her consent. When the victim reported the assault to the authorities, Jamie sent threatening messages to her friend via social media, attempting to coerce her into withdrawing the complaint. Despite the friend's testimony, his identity was legally protected. Jamie was charged with the assault and attempting to pervert the course of justice, resulting in his arrest. However, He was soon released on bail. In June 2021, Amber traveled to Bothwell, the place where Jamie lived. Although she didn't know Jamie, they ended up in the same lodging unit. That night, while Amber was asleep, Jamie attacked and assaulted her. Amber awoke to find herself undressed, with Jamie, also naked, beside her. She had no recollection of embracing or kissing him, leading to speculation that he might have drugged her, though no tests were conducted to confirm this. Gathering her courage, Amber reported the assault to the police. She identified Jamie from a photo lineup. The police started investigating the case. In July, Jamie faced justice again. Witnesses included the Amber and the first victim. Their testimonies revealed Jamie's method of preying on vulnerable girls. Jamie appeared in court via video link from police custody. His defense argued that his actions might be linked to his traumatic childhood. However, acknowledging his difficult past, the High Court judged him for his poor choices. Jamie was found guilty of both assaults, his name added indefinitely to the sex offender registry. He was also convicted of attempting to pervert the course of justice and breaching bail conditions. The sentencing hearing at the High Court in Edinburgh soon followed. One of the first to speak was the defense attorney, who emphasized that the authorities should consider the sentencing guidelines for individuals under 25 years old. In Scotland, the law suggests that younger people should receive lighter sentences due to their emotional immaturity and higher potential for rehabilitation. To support his argument, the defense lawyer pointed out a report indicating that Jamie exhibited cognitive and emotional immaturity. After hearing the defense's case, the judge acknowledged the relevance of Jamie's age and difficult background. However, he reminded Jamie and everyone in attendance that the crimes were still severe, even describing them as atrocious due to their impact on innocent victims. Consequently, the judge sentenced Jamie to 10.5 years in prison. Moreover, given the high risk of reoffending, Jamie was ordered to be under supervision for 2 years following his release. After the hearing, the police stated that the evidence and testimony provided by Amber were crucial in securing the conviction. Throughout this challenging process, Connor reached out to the Hill House Children's Unit to talk to his sister. Despite knowing his volatile temperament, Amber clung to the hope of reconnecting with her only available family member. The residence manager tried to discourage her from contacting Connor, but her efforts were in vain. Amber's close friend recalled that, despite their turbulent relationship, Amber had a special bond with Connor and was eager to see him. However, just as suddenly as he appeared, he disappeared, leaving her with unanswered questions. Amber tried to move forward with her life as best as she could, demonstrating an enviable spirit and determination. After a few months, Connor resurfaced. Likely driven by genuine affection for her only biological family member, Amber was excited when he expressed his desire to meet. They arranged a time and date and met in downtown Hamilton on the night of Friday, November 26, 2021. Overjoyed by her brother's presence, Amber took a selfie with him and posted it on her social media profile. It was the last time anyone heard from her. Around 10 p.m., security cameras captured the siblings walking together through the streets of Hamilton. At some point, out of the camera's view, Connor attacked Amber. He assaulted her, inflicted severe head and body injuries, and then strangled her until she died. About 90 minutes later, without attempting to hide the body, Connor headed back to the hostel where he was staying. Security cameras recorded his disheveled state, and footage showed him collapsing against a metal barrier. He eventually pulled himself together and disposed of his blood-stained clothes. Just before midnight, he returned to the hostel and told a staff member that he and his sister had argued. Later, another camera showed Connor going to the dumpsters outside the building with a plastic bucket in hand. He also called the Hill House Children's Unit, telling them not to worry if Amber didn't return, insisting that she was fine. Despite his assurances, the authorities reported Amber missing that same night. On Friday, November 26, 2021, retired William Corrigan took his 45-year-old son, Stephen Corrigan, to get a COVID-19 vaccine. Due to a recent fall, Stephen had his arm in a sling and needed extra support from his father. After getting vaccinated, Stephen decided to take a night walk and stumbled upon Amber's abandoned body. Rather than alerting the police, Stephen committed his own heinous acts by desecrating Amber's remains. He then concealed her body among leaves and bushes before leaving. Unaware of Amber's tragic fate, her loved ones and the authorities searched for her everywhere. Meanwhile, Connor sent a cryptic message to a group of 5 friends, saying he needed help with something, without specifying details. To create an alibi, he messaged Amber, asking if she was okay. He then told his friends that he had resolved the issue on his own. As the search for Amber continued, Craig and Carol grew increasingly anxious. They hadn't heard from Connor until a call on Sunday, November 28, 2021, when he told them that he and Amber had fought the previous Friday. Later that same Sunday, the police finally discovered Amber's body. Her underwear had been torn, and she had suffered severe head trauma. After securing the scene, investigators searched the area and found Amber's blood-stained shorts and t-shirt in a nearby dumpster. After informing her loved ones of the tragic outcome, the detective team began reconstructing Amber's movements from the last time she was seen to when her life was taken, and her body left in the middle of nowhere. At a press conference, one of the detectives appealed to the public for information. He emphasized the importance of understanding the events leading to Amber's fatal attack and urged anyone with information to come forward to help bring closure to her family. Knowing the community's fear and parents' concerns for their daughter's safety, he stressed that capturing the perpetrator was crucial for public safety. He pointed out that Amber was last seen in a busy part of town on a Friday night, suggesting there must have been many witnesses. He called on anyone who saw her to contact the authorities. Following the press conference, some people came forward with potential information, but none provided useful leads. Investigators continued their work, and the forensic pathologist's report highlighted that Amber was found covered in mud and had died from neck compression. Bloodstains found on her jacket were sent for DNA analysis, which revealed a chilling truth. The blood matched her brother Connor's DNA. Additionally, Connor's DNA was found on Amber's forcibly removed underwear. Another unidentified male DNA sample was also discovered, complicating the case further. With such evidence in hand, Connor became the prime suspect in the case. He continued to feign innocence and create false alibis that quickly fell apart. One such clumsy attempt was a social media post on December 1st, where he pretended to pay tribute to his sister, lavishing her with praise and claiming he would miss her dearly. The next day, he searched the internet on his phone for ways to mislead the police. He also posted several angry messages on his social media accounts. Hours later, he was arrested. Meanwhile, the details of the case were kept under strict confidentiality to avoid jeopardizing the investigation. However, some information leaked, and it became known that the victim's brother was under police scrutiny. Feeling the pressure from the police, Connor did not give up trying to distance himself from the crime. Instead, he pushed a local media outlet to publish a tribute to his sister. Forensic DNA analyses and other evidence continued to provide valuable information at a rapid pace. It was determined that Connor's clothing had traces of his sister's blood. Additionally, the analysis revealed that the third biological material belonged to Stephen Corrigan. A cybercrime expert analyzed Connor's phone and uncovered further evidence that clarified the case. Suspicious messages to his group of 5 friends and the one sent to Amber, knowing he had just killed her, were particularly incriminating. His internet search history only further exposed him. As these details began to emerge publicly, the complex story of Amber's tragic end came to light. Connor had to appear in Hamilton Sheriff Court to face charges of murder, sexual assault, and attempting to pervert the course of justice. Prosecutors stated that Amber had complete trust in her brother, which he brutally betrayed by taking her life. The court ruled that Connor should remain in police custody pending further investigations and court appearances. Stephen Corrigan was also arrested shortly thereafter. On January 13, 2022, he appeared in Hamilton Sheriff Court, charged with attempting to pervert the course of justice. He pleaded not guilty. Like Connor, Stephen was held in police custody awaiting his trial. The year 2022 was filled with legal proceedings, making it an extremely challenging time for Carol and her husband Craig, who were grappling with the grief of losing Amber and the shock of Connor's possible guilt. On November 1, 2022, which would have been Amber's 17th birthday, her friends and family celebrated her memory. They shared heartfelt messages and wishes for her eternal rest, along with photos of her on social media. Carol changed her profile picture to one of Amber, finding a measure of peace in the gesture, feeling that it symbolized having done everything possible for her. Additionally, Amber's loved ones created a memorial under a bridge near where her body was found. They placed bouquets, balloons, and candles in her honor. Unfortunately, the memorial was vandalized a few days later when vandals set fire to a nearby dumpster, causing flames to spread. In response, family and friends held a gathering in a park, releasing balloons, some shaped like the letter A for Amber, into the sky. While the wound from Amber's loss remained fresh, Connor's trial finally took place in July 2023. Throughout the trial, Connor denied any involvement in the crime and the sexual assault against his sister. Despite his denials, the evidence against him was overwhelming. His defense lawyer attempted to garner some sympathy from the court by highlighting Connor's lifelong neglect and emotional abuse, suggesting these factors could explain some of his actions. Next, the Director of Health and Social Care testified, describing the case as desperately sad and distressing. The court also heard that Connor appeared unshaken when speaking with Craig on the day Amber's body was found. Craig testified about Connor's increasingly problematic behavior. After a 13-day trial, the Glasgow High Court found Connor guilty of all 3 charges. The judge described the crime as depraved and warned Connor that he would face severe consequences. 15 days later, Stephen faced justice for his involvement. During his trial, he tried to present an unassailable alibi, claiming he spent the night at his elderly father's home and had spent much of the time playing computer games. However, the evidence against him continued to mount. Stephen also claimed that he didn't know why his DNA was found on Amber's body. While William corroborated much of his son's account, he admitted to the jury that he couldn't be certain of Stephen's actions during most of that weekend. Ultimately, Stephen was found guilty of attempting to pervert the course of justice and disturbing public order. In September 2023, during a joint hearing, both men received their sentences. Connor Gibson was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 22 years before he can be considered for parole. Stephen received a 9-year prison sentence. In a statement following the trial, Craig and Carol acknowledged that their lives would never be the same. They described Amber as the most generous, caring, compassionate, and admirable person they had ever known. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Christopher Wilder lived a life full of excitement and luxury. As a race car driver, he had a flashy lifestyle that included fancy cars and high-end cameras. He easily attracted many young women who were unaware of his dark side. In February 1984, Wilder began a horrifying journey across the country. Over 7 weeks, he harmed and took the lives of at least 8 young women who were hopeful models. This tragic series of events led to him being known as the Beauty Queen Killer. Christopher Wilder was born on March 13, 1945, in Sydney, Australia. He was the oldest of 4 sons to an American father, Coley Chapman Wilder, a naval officer, and an Australian mother, June Wilder. His life began with a dramatic twist. During his birth, he turned in such a way that his neck got tangled in the umbilical cord. He was stuck and began to suffocate, with his heartbeat becoming barely noticeable. Any attempt to pull him out only made the situation worse. At that time, cesarean sections weren't commonly performed. Seeing their efforts failing, the doctors decided to call the hospital priest to administer the last rites. Miraculously, as they prayed for him, his vital signs completely stabilized. This early brush with death left his parents deeply traumatized, leading them to be extremely overprotective. Despite their vigilant care, it wasn't long before another frightening incident occurred. One summer afternoon, while the family was enjoying their pool, 2-year-old Christopher dove into the water right under his Uncle John's watchful eye. He was underwater just long enough to lose consciousness. Fortunately, his father, skilled in emergency response, quickly applied resuscitation techniques. After a few tense minutes, Christopher was revived. The incident led to many health problems for Christopher during his early years, including seizures. This also affected him psychologically, making him feel fragile compared to other kids. From a young age, Christopher's father instilled military discipline in him, with his mother's full blessing. To Christopher, his dad was everything, and his greatest wish was to grow up to be strong like him, leaving behind the frail and sickly image that marked his childhood. Christopher's teenage years were stable. He enjoyed a privileged life, was educated in top schools, and had a family that was always ready to do everything for him. However, this wasn't enough to satisfy him. Puberty increased his desire to be a powerful person. He longed to influence and dominate others, so his behavior became rebellious. In the evenings, he would sneak out of his house with the intention of lurking around. When he spotted girls walking by themselves, he would quietly follow them to their homes and then watch them through the windows as they changed clothes. Satisfying her sexual appetite was her only desire. The proximity of his home to the sea made the beach his favorite place to spend his afternoons. Like any Australian boy, surfing became one of his favorite pastimes, and it made him gain muscle. No longer an insecure boy, The transformation allowed him to become confident and attractive to young girls, but not because he wanted to date them. His intentions were darker. In the summer of 1963, a few months before his 17th birthday, he and his friends were enjoying another afternoon of surfing and beers when they decided to walk the beach in search of girls. They spotted a 13-year-old girl sunbathing. They offered her a few drinks, and Christopher began making advances towards her. She felt uneasy and tried to leave, but he grabbed her arm, led her behind a dune, and abused her while his friends watched without intervening. He left her there and walked away as if nothing had happened. The girl reported the incident, and Christopher, a known figure in the area, was soon arrested. He pleaded guilty, but his parents interceded on his behalf, claiming that he was a bright young man with a promising future that would be ruined in prison. The court took these arguments into consideration and granted him probation with a series of precautionary measures. One of the steps taken was for him to undergo psychiatric treatment involving electroconvulsive therapy. This involved administering short bursts of electric shocks to the brain, with intensities varying from 75 to 470 volts. The purpose was to treat what was described as a damaged mind. In truth, his condition didn't improve. Instead, his disturbing fantasies only grew. Around the same time, Christopher became fixated on a book called The Collector by John Fowles. The story follows a solitary entomologist who collects butterflies and becomes obsessed with a beautiful art student. This chilling narrative appeared to inspire him deeply. The therapists who treated him during this time knew he was fascinated by this book, which he had nearly memorized. For him, it represented the ultimate fantasy of having complete power over another person. On a warm day in January 1965, two 15-year-old girls, Mary Ann Schmidt and Christine Sherrick, went with their younger siblings to Wanda Beach, an ideal spot for surfing. That afternoon, the wind was too strong for a peaceful stroll, so the group decided to take shelter in the dunes. Mary Ann told her younger siblings that she and Christine would go fetch their backpacks from the rocky area at the south end of the beach, and then they'd return to head home together. Hours passed and the girls never showed up. The next morning, their lifeless bodies were discovered in the sand. Christine had been stabbed 14 times, and Mary Ann's throat was deeply slashed. Their undergarments were completely torn, a clear indication of an attempted rape. The brutality of the crime shocked Sydney and became front-page news in both local and international media. Over 7,000 people were investigated, and Christopher was a key suspect since his physical description and psychological profile matched that of the perpetrator. Despite these coincidences, there was no evidence to charge him, and his DNA did not match the sample the police had from the assailant. By early 1967, it seemed like the turmoil in Christopher's life was behind him. While out for a walk in Sydney's Palm Beach, he met Christine Paluk. They connected instantly and quickly became friends. Their bond deepened, blossoming into a romantic relationship. He loved taking her to the best surfing spots and driving around the city together. To fully win her heart, he often asked Christine to also invite her younger sister, who was 15. After a month of dating, Christine began to feel uneasy, especially because he often looked at her younger sister in a peculiar way. Alarm bells rang when what seemed like a latent violent streak became glaringly apparent during a dinner at his parents' house. That day, without any apparent reason, Christopher suddenly became enraged and punched out a dining room window. Despite this disturbing event, their love overcame the turmoil, and the couple got married after a year. From day one, Christopher gave free rein to all his sexual fantasies, and if his wife refused, he would beat her until she agreed. More than sexual intercourse, those intimate encounters were rape. The hell was short. Just a week after the marriage, The wife found underwear and pornographic photos of young girls in her husband's car. She decided to end the relationship and, accompanied by her mother, went to the police and accused him of sexual abuse and physical violence. She also told them of her suspicion that he might be the killer of the teenage girls in Wanda Beach. Once the report was made, the police began their investigation. Christopher knew he was under scrutiny and could be arrested at any moment, but as usual, luck was on his side. There was no solid case against him. However, the warning prompted him to distance himself from the situation, and with his father's help, he emigrated to the United States. By early 1969, he had settled in Boynton Beach, Florida. He adapted easily and found his calling as an electrical contractor and construction engineer. The real estate boom at the time quickly made him a lot of money, and he became even wealthier when he ventured into the real estate business. With his newfound wealth, Christopher bought a luxurious bachelor pad. He had two public passions: photography and competing in amateur car races. He bought several high-end cameras and set up a photo studio in his condominium. This hobby soon became a ploy to seduce beautiful young women. Using his charisma and approachable appearance, he posed as a talent scout for famous magazines, thereby attracting vulnerable victims to fulfill his sexual perversions. Christopher spent considerable time roaming the beaches of South Florida, looking for women until one day he was arrested in Pompano Beach for demanding that two girls pose nude for him. The police detained him, but not for long. He only had to pay a hefty fine to be released. 3 years later, while at a shopping mall, he posed as a photographer and convinced a schoolgirl to allow him to take pictures of her for a prominent magazine of the time. Upon arriving at his van, he drugged her and forced her to have sex with him inside the vehicle. The girl fled and filed a complaint with the police. He was arrested again but managed to negotiate the charges, claiming that his mind shut down on weekends. As a result, he was granted probation with a therapy regimen. Despite his ongoing criminal record, Christopher had managed to evade any formal charges until the mid-1980s, when he persuaded a teenager to get into his car for a photo shoot in a rural location. There, he committed a horrific sexual assault. Arrested and taken to court, he quickly pleaded guilty, but manipulated the jury into believing he would seek immediate psychiatric care, resulting in a verdict in his favor. He was sentenced to 5 years of probation with the condition of attending therapy sessions during that period. At this time, Christopher was seeking a genuine and deep relationship. It was then that he met Elizabeth Kenyon, a 19-year-old who had recently been an Orange Bowl princess and a finalist in Miss Florida. Their relationship was brief. He quickly proposed marriage, but she declined, citing the age difference as too significant, though they remained on good terms. It had been more than 10 years since he last saw his parents, and using this as a reason, he persuaded the court to allow him to travel to Australia. Once permission was granted, he returned to Sydney in 1982. It didn't take long for him to resume his previous modus operandi. He took with him his cameras and a bunch of cards with a false name to pose as a model photographer. One afternoon, he was able to trick two girls under the usual pretext and drove them to an isolated area of the beach where he forced them to undress and pose suggestive poses. Seeing the fear in the teenage girls, he put them in his car and drove them to his hotel. While there, he threatened to beat them. He tied them up, abused them for hours, and then released them. But he was arrested and charged with kidnapping and sexual assault. The case went to an initial detention hearing in a local magistrate's court. The accused didn't seem worried about the charges and claimed that it had all been a misunderstanding. His parents paid a substantial amount of $400,000 for his bail, and he was allowed to return to Florida to handle business matters. Christopher promised to return for the hearing scheduled for April 1984. This situation put him at a crossroads. He was unable to control his impulses, was about to be tried in Australia, and was already known in the United States. He couldn't risk being charged again. The only solution he could think of was a dark one: ensure his victims could not live to tell their stories. Back in Florida, he resumed his passion for cars, and on February 26, 1984, he participated in the Miami Grand Prix with his Porsche. There, he approached Rosario Gonzalez, who was working as a product promoter. Rosario shared her aspirations to be a model and her recent participation in Miss Florida. He persuaded her to have a quick meeting in a nearby cafe to arrange a photo shoot for her portfolio. She agreed, and at noon, they were seen leaving the location in his car. Rosario lived with her parents, who knew she was supposed to return home between 5 and 6 p.m. When she was going to be late, she always notified them. For this reason, and because she did not make any contact, her parents quickly filed a missing person report. Witnesses confirmed that the young woman had left the racetrack between noon and 1 p.m. with a Caucasian man around 30 years old. Rosario's car was found parked near a shopping plaza, but there were no traces of her. The Miami Herald published a profile of the suspect. By then, Elizabeth, his former girlfriend, had become a teacher for children with special needs. On March 5, 1984, in the late afternoon after finishing her workday, she headed to the gym as was her routine. After leaving the building, she exchanged a few words with the security guard and then walked away in her Chrysler. She made a brief stop at her usual gas station and, by chance, ran into Christopher. He wasted no time in asking if she wanted to model for him in a session, and she happily agreed, so they continued their journey together. That night, Elizabeth hadn't returned to her apartment, but her roommate wasn't worried, assuming she was visiting her parents in Pompano Beach, Florida, about 50 miles away. The next day, when Elizabeth didn't show up for work, her family, knowing it was out of character for her to leave without notice, decided to report her missing. Frustrated with the slow pace of the police investigation, her parents hired a private investigator. With his expertise, he quickly linked Elizabeth's case to that of the young woman who disappeared during the Miami Grand Prix. He also recognized similarities between the ex-boyfriend and the suspect described in the press. The detective visited Christopher's residence, but when questioned, Christopher claimed he hadn't spoken to Elizabeth for over a month and had no idea where she could be. As soon as the detective left, Christopher destroyed all his pornographic material. He then packed his belongings, including his cameras, withdrew $50,000 from his bank accounts, started his car, and headed north towards Georgia, resigned to the fact that his capture was imminent. After driving for 2 hours to northern Florida, he stopped at the first shopping center he found on the evening of March 19th. With camera in hand and his fake business cards, he approached a 21-year-old woman named Teresa Ann Ferguson, who was shopping. He offered her a modeling job, and his words swayed her. He led her to his car and opened the trunk to show her the equipment to convince her of the job's legitimacy. However, when she was momentarily distracted, he grabbed her by the hair and forced her into the trunk. He drove to a marshy area in northern Florida. Ensuring they were alone, he opened the trunk, dragged Teresa out, and strangled her. Without hesitation, he placed her body on the marsh's edge to conceal the heinous crime. In his frantic journey, Christopher made his way to Tallahassee, the capital of Florida, about 4 hours away. His first stop was Governor's Square Mall. In his usual manner, he approached college student Linda Grover, complimented her beauty, and filled her head with fantasies of being on the cover of Vogue if she agreed to work with him. Initially, she refused, but eventually his persistence led her to agree to see the cameras in his car. When he opened the trunk, he pulled out a blanket, restrained her with it, and forced her into the car. He fled the scene, crossing into Bainbridge, Georgia. There, he dragged Linda to a cheap motel where he raped her and subjected her to various tortures. After 2 hours of this nightmare, while he slept, Linda managed to sneak to the bathroom and started screaming. He grabbed all her belongings and escaped. Linda was rescued and identified her attacker from photographs shown by the police. Meanwhile, Christopher fled the state. He drove all night, covering a 9-hour journey to Beaumont, Texas, where he took a break in the parking lot of Lamar University. There, he noticed a nursing student named Terry Walden. Despite deploying his usual charm, she flatly rejected him. On March 23rd, he returned to the mall and was again met with rejections, leaving him deeply frustrated and considering leaving empty-handed. However, he then saw Terry again. Thinking she might have changed her mind, he approached and insisted once more, but her response was the same as before. Enraged by her rejection, he followed her unnoticed to the parking lot. As she opened the door of her car, he suddenly appeared and pushed her inside. Driven by his anger, he took her to a secluded spot where he stabbed her 43 times in the chest, then dumped her body in a nearby canal. He fled in her car. During the search for the nursing student, Texas authorities found Christopher's car abandoned in the mall parking lot. There, they discovered hair samples belonging to Teresa, confirming his responsibility for her death on Merritt Island. By March 25th, Christopher was in Oklahoma, hunting for another victim at the local Penn Square Mall. There, he met a 21-year-old woman who dreamed of becoming a model. His tactic worked better than ever. It was not difficult to convince her to come to his car under the pretense of conducting a photo session for $100. He drove 180 miles north to Newton, Kansas, checked into room 30 of a motel, and abused her until dawn. After breakfast, with absolute coldness, he drove his victim 90 miles northeast of Newton near Junction City, Kansas, where he stabbed her to death and dumped her body near Milford Reservoir. By March 29th, Christopher was in Colorado, continuing his spree. This time, he was at Grand Junction. He started looking for a specific type, a girl with a cowgirl look. He found his target in 19-year-old Cheryl Lynn Bonaventura. Well-dressed and polite, he introduced himself as a modeling agent, and she was thrilled with the proposal, as it was her dream. Naively, she voluntarily got into his car, agreeing to the plan to leave the city. Along the way, they stopped at a restaurant in Silverton where, in front of the staff, they pretended to be a married couple heading to Las Vegas. They arrived the next morning at the Four Corners Monument, where the states of Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico meet. They took a photo at the iconic spot and continued their journey to Page, Arizona, near the Utah border. There, Christopher booked a room under the same pretense of being a married couple. On March 31st, Cheryl's family reported her missing to the police, though they hoped it was just a misunderstanding or an act of rebellion due to her age. Unfortunately, that morning, Cheryl and Christopher's journey took them to the Kanab River in Utah, a remote area with deserts, mountains, and cliffs. As they silently admired the scenery, Christopher unexpectedly stabbed his victim and then shot her, leaving her lifeless. He abandoned her body in a desert area. Christopher's journey continued to Las Vegas, Nevada. His plan was to attend a modeling event, which for him was a paradise filled with naive girls eager to succeed in the tough world of flashes and glamour. Camera in hand, he arrived and sat in the front row to scout his potential victims. At the end of the day, after talking with several teenagers, he focused his attention on 17-year-old Michelle Lynn Korfman. She had driven over 25 miles from her home in Boulder City, Nevada. Nervous about participating in her first casting, she had asked her family and friends to let her go alone. They talked, and Christopher filled her with compliments. Subsequently, Michelle changed her clothes and left the mall in his company. It was April 1st. As soon as Las Vegas authorities alerted the FBI about the disappearance of the young woman at the modeling event, the agents reacted swiftly, requesting all photographs taken during the evening. A photographer promptly handed over 5 rolls of film. After developing them, they could see Michelle walking the runway, with Christopher intently focusing on her. Meanwhile, like the others before her, Michelle suffered violence and torture at his hands. Her body was left at a rest stop in Southern California. On April 4th, Christopher reached the opposite coast of the United States, in Torrance, California. There, he went to a shopping mall, where he saw a girl filling out a job application. She was Tina Marie Risico, 16 years old. He offered her the usual plan and the same $100, much more than she would earn as a store employee. The young girl was hesitant but excused herself, saying she needed to get home. Her rejection did not sit well with him. He pointed a gun at her and demanded she get into his car without making any noise. Frightened, she complied, and then sat in silence for 2 hours while he drove to San Diego. Once in the city, Christopher rented a room and unleashed his usual barrage of abuses against the girl. During a break, he turned on the TV and was shocked to see a special bulletin announcing him as a new addition to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list, specifically linking him to the disappearance and murder of several young women. He was dubbed the Beauty Queen Killer. In a turn of events, he chose not to kill Tina, but instead coerced her into becoming his accomplice to lure more victims. In exchange for her cooperation, he promised to release her in the next city. Terrified, she agreed. He started driving back east and arrived in Merrillville, Indiana on April 10th. There, Tina kept her word. At the South Lake Mall, she convinced 16-year-old Dawnette Sue Wilt to join them, assuring the young girl that another woman's presence meant safety. In the parking lot, Christopher pulled out a gun and forced Dawnette into the car. Once at a nearby hotel, Tina witnessed him attacking Dawnette for 2 consecutive days. Christopher kept the TV on and saw another FBI bulletin, this time Tina's mother pleading for her daughter's life. Panicked, he ordered the girls to grab their belongings and get into the car immediately. He then drove non-stop to the border of New York. Considering it too risky to travel with both, he left his car in a wooded area of Penyon. While Tina stayed in the car under threat of death if she left, he took Dawnette into the small forest. Suddenly, he began to strangle her. She fought back fiercely, but he pulled out a knife and stabbed her twice in the chest. Thinking her dead, he walked away. Fortunately, Dawnette was still alive. With great effort, she managed to drag herself to the side of the road. A truck driver took her to the hospital in Penyon, where they managed to save her life. Hours later, she was able to report what had happened to the county sheriff. She detailed her attacker and the young woman accompanying him. She described the vehicle they were traveling in and their intended escape destination, Canada. This triggered a police operation to capture the fugitive. Christopher drove to Victor, New York, just 50 minutes from where he had abandoned Dawnette. He parked at the Eastview Mall, exited the car violently with a gun in hand, and kidnapped Beth Elaine Dodge, a 33-year-old woman who was passing time while waiting for her daughter to come out of daycare. He forced her into his vehicle and commanded Tina to drive Beth's car. After a short drive to the outskirts of the city, he stopped next to an abandoned gravel quarry. He pointed the gun at Beth, led her to a densely wooded area, and shot her in the back. Then he made Tina transfer all belongings from the other car to the stolen one. In his way, Christopher reassured Tina that he would not harm her and chose to drive to Logan Airport in Boston. There, he bought her a ticket back to California and set her free. While in Boston, he headed north to Beverly, Massachusetts, attempting to kidnap 19-year-old Carol, who he assaulted suddenly on the street. However, he was unsuccessful as she managed to escape screaming for help. Descriptions of both the vehicle and the suspect were circulated among patrol officers, making it only a matter of hours before the serial killer would be caught. On the afternoon of April 13th, needing directions to Canada, he stopped at a gas station in Colebrook, New Hampshire. However, 2 state troopers recognized him and approached. At that moment, Christopher reached for the gun in the car, threatened the officers, and a struggle ensued with one of them. Suddenly, the revolver went off twice. One bullet seriously injured the officer, while the other struck the killer directly in the heart. Christopher died instantly. Throughout his spree across the United States, he kidnapped, tortured, raped, and murdered 8 young women, but it is believed there were more victims. Christopher Wilder was cremated in Florida, leaving behind a personal fortune of over $7 million. In June 1986, a court-appointed arbitrator ruled that this money should be divided among the families of his victims. There were numerous missed opportunities to stop Christopher's spree of violence, which escalated into serial killings. However, his parents helped him evade punishment. Jurors were swayed by his false promises of seeking psychiatric help, and the victims were left at the mercy of his twisted mind and horrific fantasies. And that concludes today's Unreal True Crime. Remember to subscribe and hit like to let me know you appreciate my work. Until next time.